Welcome to a special 1-hour program, Navigating the Great Lakes, Life on the Lee A. Tregurtha.
When you first come out here, your body completely changes. You end up working so hard. You're using muscles you've never used before. I've told my wife many a times, I'm like, I wish you could see what I'm seeing right now. There's some completely amazing things that nobody will ever see.
We're diving into the Great Lakes shipping industry, the men and women that dedicate their lives to moving cargo through the Great Lakes, the ships that make it possible, and the processes, new and old, that allow the transporting of raw materials across our waterways and our country.
My job is to move this boat. It's to move cargo. But the most important thing that I do, that I pride myself on, is making sound decisions.
I want to begin with the opportunity, joining the crew of the Lee A. Tregurtha. Many of you have asked how I was able to gain access and hop aboard. This assignment started in the spring of 2023 when I posed a question on Facebook. What should I do for an adventure this year? Over the years, I've documented and shared my travels to Isle Royale, Pictured Rocks, the Porcupine Mountains. And this particular year, I was a little unsure of where to go next. One of my top followers, my aunt, responded with, "Take a ride on an oarboat." And so it began. I had hoped to go sometime that summer, but summer nearly came and went, and things just weren't lining up. I was anxious, I was feeling a little deflated. But then my contact from the Interlake Steamship Company sent the email I had been waiting for. It looks like the schedule gods have aligned for us for a trip next week. We would together board the Lee A. Tregurtha in Marquette at the Upper Harbor Ore Dock right behind me. And then we'd head to Burns Harbor, Indiana, and our news director would pick us up and take us home. And here's why it mattered so much to me. The oarboats of the Great Lakes are perhaps the most photographed, the most iconic, the most mysterious attractions of the Upper Peninsula. We're captivated by them, drawn to them. We sit along the shore watching as they glide through the water, seemingly unfazed by the wind, waves, and wild weather conditions. We track them. Tourists plan trips for a chance to view them. We're in awe at their size and all they accomplish. They have become a symbol of who we are. The oarboats of the Great Lakes, rich in history, rich in UP culture. They are as much a part of us as the food we eat, the snow we shovel, and the mountains we climb. And oh, the stories they tell. Join me on a journey through the Great Lakes aboard the Lee A. Tregurtha, a vessel within the Interlake Steamship Company. Our leg begins in Marquette as the Lee A. docks to load taconite, iron ore pellets, before taking off on a 37-hour ride to Burns Harbor, Indiana. One of the first lessons of boarding the Lee A. Tregurtha is she moves at her own pace and we adjust to her. She arrived to the ore dock in Marquette's Upper Harbor nearly 4 hours later than we were told, on a calm, clear morning around 3:30 a.m. She barely seemed to make a sound. One of the second lessons, while it may not seem like it from the shore, there's a crew on board that never stops bustling to keep the ship, the schedule, and the cargo moving.
We're a workboat. We're moving, 24/7, unless we're loading or unloading. We're constantly on the move.
On this morning, the crew is loading nearly 26,000 tons of iron ore from the Tilden mine into the belly of the ship. It's a mesmerizing process, one that takes 6 to 8 hours, one that has stood the test of time.
Outside of a few modern adjustments, this is the same ore dock that has been here for over 100 years now.
The chutes come down, now by a hydraulic system. The pellets go in and water goes out.
When we pulled into the dock, we're carrying ballast water in our tanks. And that is that's just water that we carry to compensate for not having any cargo. As we load iron ore here or at another dock, the iron ore goes into the cargo holds and we're pumping that water out then in turn.
One of the primary duties of the first mate is to load the boat. Chris Pilkington, who will celebrate his 3rd anniversary with the Interlake Steamship Company on this trip, takes to the deck, monitoring the entire process from first pellet to last.
And at docks, we stand a cargo watch. In Marquette in particular, the first mate is in charge of loading the boat while the other mate pumps the ballast. So I'll be out there with my little clipboard, putting all the ore in the boat.
It's a big responsibility, ensuring the boat is loaded properly. Though the 3rd lesson of Lee A. Tregurtha, every crew member carries a big responsibility.
I still feel like I'm learning stuff all the time. You know, you can move up pretty quick here, but yeah, I still feel like I'm learning every day.
Marquette has a shifting dock, meaning the boat will move back and forth through the process, lining the chutes up to the shipping compartments. It's why the process takes a bit longer in Marquette than in other ports. But still, it's efficient in the most economical way of transporting iron ore.
When we get done loading, we will have taken the equivalent of 454 rail cars from Marquette to Burns Harbor. Imagine that on your train tracks.
I'm sitting on top of one of the shipping containers on the Lee A. Tregurtha, and while on this trip we're transporting iron ore, it can also transport coal, stone, and salt. The company calls it the building blocks of America, and they've been doing it for over 100 years, headquartered right out of Cleveland, Ohio. Once loaded, it takes Captain Nick just 30 minutes to back her out and begin the journey east on Lake Superior. The crew will rest during the 15-hour trip to the Soo Locks. Watchmen will take shifts in the pilot house. There'll be lunch and dinner, a sunset and night skies. These are the quieter times on the boat as they anticipate and prepare for the next shift, navigating the Soo Locks and the St. Mary's River.
Going through the rivers, just us, the captain, the wheelsman, talking, drinking coffee, hanging out. It's a good time.
I learned it's a good life, but a hard life, and not for everyone. After the break, we go below deck for an up-close look at the mechanics of the Lee A. Tregurtha, and we hear from the crew about life on the Great Lakes, how they balance time on the boat with time back at home. And we'll begin to see the strength they hold and the bonds they share with each other, the ship, and the mission. Welcome back to our 1-hour special, Navigating the Great Lakes, Life on the Lee A. Tregurtha. One of the many surprises I encountered on the Lee A was that I never lost cell service. I expected to not be able to communicate with anyone at the station or at home the entire time. However, because the ship is equipped with Starlink, I wasn't just able to check in, I was able to take our experience live with our viewers a number of times via Facebook. One of those was well below the deck, showing off the engine room. It was my favorite part of the boat, just the magnitude of the engines and all the pipes, controls, electrical, and plumbing that runs through the ship. It was really incredible to walk through. Take a look.
I wanted to show you the engine room of the Lee A. Tregurtha. I've been trying to show you a lot of the different areas from the top of the deck to below the deck, and this morning we were able to go about as far below deck as I think you can. So that was really cool. We've come up a little bit now, and I just wanted to again show you what the engine room looks like, what the engines look like. I'm going to leave the control open.
The Lee A is truly a vessel like no other. She was built in 1942 for the ocean, was used during World War II, and actually in Tokyo Bay during the surrendering of Japan. She proudly displays the medal she earned during war and is one of the most altered vessels on the Great Lakes. It's a point of pride for the captain and the crew.
You tell someone, oh yeah, I'm the captain on a boat that was built in 1942. They're like, wait, that thing's still moving? Well, absolutely. We're freshwater. Interlake Steamship, as a company, invests millions of dollars in these boats all winter. You know, from steel renewal, from cargo holds to decking. Over time, a lot of work is done.
The Lee A. Tregurtha has changed ownership a number of times, but is currently owned by the Interlake Steamship Company. One of the largest investments by Interlake was removing the steam plant on board and replacing it with 2 diesel engines and a scrubber system, as you just saw in the tour of the engine room. Let's now hear from the crew, some who've been on the ship for over 80 days, as they detail their schedule, their ship, and life as they know it. Every person on board the Lee A. Tregurtha has a different reason behind joining the crew.
My dad sailed. He was a captain out here. I decided, well, I'll give it a try for a couple months. Sail the summer, see how it goes. So that was March of 1999.
My grandfather, I used to go on his boat when I was a kid, and there's really not a whole lot up north, so I was like, might as well go sailing. My wife told me to go sailing. That's what she said, go sailing.
Yeah, I didn't like sitting in an office. I didn't like the idea of doing that for the next 30 years, so I kind of threw a dart at a wall and picked something out of the blue.
Regardless of why they decided to sail or what position they hold, they're all a vital part of the system that moves cargo through the Great Lakes.
That's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of work, but it's a good job, and I'm happy to do it here because I know the boat well. A ship's like a little city, so anything that a city has, you know, sewer, plumbing, electrical, all the mechanical stuff, we have all of that on board.
A city with many moving parts. But don't be fooled. This isn't a joyride. It's hard work, long days, and requires mental toughness many can't fathom.
When you first come out here, your body completely changes. You end up working so hard. You're using muscles you've never used before.
It's challenging. It's challenging for everybody out here, personally. You know, being away from family and friends, it's tough for everybody. So I'm not that much different.
Ryan Carpentier spends most of his time on the boat below deck. As the chief engineer, it's his primary duty to keep all of the ship's moving parts doing just that, moving.
We can monitor all of our temperatures and pressures and open and close valves from here. We can switch over generators from here. We can monitor the scrubber system. One of the interesting things, our steering gear is pretty much original to the ship. So while the engine room's been upgraded, the steering gear is still from early 1940s.
A multi-million-dollar project replaced the Lee A steam plant with 2 4,000 horsepower Rolls-Royce Bergen engines with a controllable pitch prop and exhaust scrubber system.
When everyone sees us sailing along the lakes and get that beautiful little plume going, that's all steam. That's it. That's all that's coming out of my stacks now is steam, even though we're burning a heavy fuel. We're almost net zero on emissions, and we're well below any government standards.
It's something the crew is proud of. There's a lot that happens they take pride in, from the day-to-day operations to the relationships they've formed. And as each day brings them something different, they're the constants they can lean on.
The perfect day is when everything goes right. We have great weather, a nice, calm day. And I get to see the guys I work with, that we all get to work together. Just nobody gets hurt. That's a perfect day for me. That is an absolute perfect day for me.
And it's a big thing of just realizing that we may have our differences. We may all come from different backgrounds. We may not see eye to eye on a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, every guy on this boat always looks out for the next guy, because when we're here, you're family.
I feel honored to have taken this trip with this crew, to watch them working together, often not even needing to use words, to take those moments together, to laugh, enough to appreciate the day. The bond they share, it's definitely unique and what pulls them through those tough moments. Oh, and by the way, the Lee A. Tregurtha typically travels between 12 and 13 knots when those engines are both humming and everything is running smoothly. Now I want to show you a quick tour of their sleeping quarters. One of the crew members allowed us to check out his space. He said he has an open door policy. It's a place where he can get away, but also a place where anyone can stop by for a visit, to hang out, for a chat. It's his home away from home. It's not big, it's not luxurious, but it's comfortable and it serves its purpose. Now, many of you have also asked what my accommodations look like. Now, unfortunately, while I was on board, I didn't take any official video, if you will, from my room. It just didn't seem relevant at the time. There was so much more happening, and I really didn't spend much time in my room. But I did send this Snapchat to my daughter. Yes, I do try to keep up with a bit of technology, but this shows you the space. Windows overlooking the water, a comfortable large bed, and not shown in the video was my own private bathroom as well. I was more comfortable than I anticipated, and I did not once get even a little bit seasick. The rocking of the waves was actually very calming, especially when I was able to rest for a bit. Now to the most asked question from all of you. How was the food? After the break, we head into the galley with the steward of the Lee A. Tregurtha to see how she keeps the crew fed. Imagine being on a ship for over 80 days, working long, hard shifts. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are just not going to cover it. It's the fuel of the ship, just as important as the fuel of those diesel engines. It's time now to head into the galley, where a Marquette woman works to keep the crew fed and the menu enticing for everyone. Susan Dorman has been an elementary school bus driver, a medical center clerk, and for the past 7 years, a steward for the Interlake Steamship Company. This year for the Lee A. Tregurtha.
But we do all the planning, all the ordering for the menu, and all the prep, breakfast, lunch, dinner, holidays. We do a little bit of everything.
How do you wrap your brain around feeding this crew?
Carefully. And like a mom, I just treat them like I'm at home and it's my family.
And it looks just like you'd expect a family sitting down for a meal to look like. Enjoying a meal together, conversation, a chance to fuel their bodies and take a break. But let's be honest, cooking for a family of 4 is challenging in itself. To prepare food for 22 different palates, traditions, and tastes, 3 times a day, 7 days a week, well, that's a big job.
I try to cook home-cooked meals and try to keep everyone happy. Not everyone's happy all the time. It's just part of the surroundings.
Dorman says she's always willing to take suggestions from the crew and is constantly looking for new recipes and reading cookbooks for inspiration.
If I got chicken breast in the fridge, it's like, okay, what new recipe can I find that I haven't done? And they're pretty open to trying things.
But it's not as easy as running to the grocery store for ingredients. Don't have an onion or garlic? Too bad. She's tied to the food she orders and the ship that delivers it.
Everybody is involved in bringing groceries on.
We picked up the week's grocery order just outside of the Soo Locks around 4 in the morning. A quick and seamless process. An efficient system perfected over years. Dorman says she tries to order a little bit of everything. On our trip, that meant steak, shrimp, pasta, fresh fruit and veggies, sandwiches. There really seemed to be something for everyone. And this was a normal week. Holidays on board the ship are even grander. There's even more planning, more of an emphasis on making each meal something special.
It takes a lot of work. My second cook is really busy during those times, helping with prepping and putting everything together. And we just put a lot of different appetizers, and we try to stay with the traditional meal but yet throw in a little extra, and it means a lot. It means a lot that everyone's happy and everyone has a full belly.
And they do all this while also feeling that same pull the rest of the crew feels. Missing family, missing friends, spending months on the boat.
I miss home every day. Miss my kids, miss my grandkids, yeah. But you know, one of the great things about being out here is when I'm off work, when I'm on vacation, I'm on vacation.
It requires the same mental toughness as the other areas on the boat. Just doing it for each other, doing your part of the bigger picture, of a mission bigger than all of them, moving thousands of tons of cargo across the Great Lakes. For Dorman, that also means being a light on a hard day, being a warm smile at the end of a long shift, being someone the crew can count on.
I think everyone needs a hug every once in a while, and if I see somebody having just that moment, oh, I'm hugging them. You know, it's like I feel like I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a grandma, I'm all of that, and everyone needs it out here.
It's a role and a job she never planned on having, but she says she loves it and doesn't plan on hanging up the apron anytime soon.
I love being on the water, for one thing. That's a big bonus when you can look out your door and just see the lake right there. And the crew, I love the crew. They're my family. They really are.
No one is going hungry on board the Lee A. I can attest to that. And if you're ever lucky enough to be served a meal Susan Dorman's planned and prepared, well, I know that you will enjoy it. While getting to know Susan, I also got to learn about another side of who she is. Look at this. She illustrated a children's book her sister-in-law wrote. The book is about an impulsive and determined clothespin with a story and a message to children that they are loved and that they are bigger than their mistakes. Shortly after I got off the boat, the book was released on Amazon. I'm hoping one day, when Susan's off the boat for the season, she'll stop by and share a bit more about this other side of who she is. We're continuing our journey on the Lee A. After the break, the Lee A. Tregurtha moves through the Soo Locks and into the St. Mary's River, what the process looks like from the ship. Thanks for joining this special program on the Lee A. Tregurtha. We've detailed the first half of our journey, taking off from Marquette's Upper Harbor, loading 26,000 tons of iron ore into the belly of the ship. We've heard about the crew and their life on board, and we got a lesson from the ship's steward on cooking for a crew of 22. We toured the engine room, and we sat in the beauty of riding a freighter through the Great Lakes. But there's still much more of our journey to Burns Harbor, Indiana. We head now to the Soo Locks, and the ship gets a new captain. We reached the Soo Locks around 3 a.m., about 15 hours after we left Marquette. And believe it or not, boat traffic was heavy. As we waited for our turn to move through the pole lock, you could feel the importance of this waterway. Every boat carrying important cargo, raw materials, vital to the American economy.
If the pole lock goes down, 90% of Great Lakes shipping is shut off, because only 10% can use the MacArthur lock because it's so small.
Nearly 3 football fields in length and carrying 26,000 tons of iron ore in her belly, the Lee A. Tregurtha needs a little extra space and patience. We're being lowered from Lake Superior to the St. Mary's River. The system works with just gravity, using 22 million gallons of water. When all is said and done, the entire process from waiting for our turn to pulling out of the lock takes close to 2 hours. It requires all hands on deck, navigation from the pilot house, ropes and winches from the deckhands. It's hard to believe it's the middle of the night. But this trip through the Soo Locks is a bit more significant, as Captain Nick will get off the boat and head home to see his wife and kids after almost 60 days at the helm, and a new captain will be coming on board.
It's a good feeling knowing that at the end of the day, I've done my job. I've been here for 2 months. I've moved the cargo. All my guys are still here. No one's been hurt. There's been no accidents. And I get to go home, and I get to enjoy that time with my wife and kids.
Captain Nick says he's been able to balance life on the boats with a family, in large part because of his wife.
She is there all the time, and it's on her when I'm gone. She really is the glue that holds this whole production together.
Time home is time to recharge, to let go of the heaviness of keeping a ship, her crew, and her cargo safe.
My job is to move this boat. It's to move cargo. But the most important thing that I do, that I pride myself on, is making sound decisions. Not only does my life get affected, but the 22 other people on board are affected by my decisions. Not only them, but also their families too. So it's a big burden. It weighs a lot.
It's a quick on and off as the boat continues its move through the locks. And just like that, the ship now has a relief captain for the next 30 days, Captain Jack.
We would call pass down notes. And so all the pertinent information that I might need to know what's going on in the boat right now is written down for me.
And it's right to work for Captain Jack. He begins navigating the St. Mary's River, while most of the crew heads back to sleep for the night, or morning. It's hard to keep it all straight.
The challenge is more of what am I walking into on this boat? What are the specific situations that are going on this boat right now?
Now, unfortunately, traveling the St. Mary's River at night doesn't allow for great video. Remember, we're on Lee A. Tregurtha's time. And so while I was looking forward to seeing the sights, there just wasn't much to see. Those moments would come at sunrise. The actual lowering into the St. Mary's River took about 20 minutes. It's a 21-foot drop, so about a foot a minute. Traveling the St. Mary's River was the quietest I saw the boat get. The crew, myself included, used those hours to rest. I learned on the Tregurtha you have to take those moments when they come, moments to recharge and prepare for the next day. When we come back, we finish our trek from Marquette to Burns Harbor, Indiana, and we experience a trip highlight, traveling under the Mackinac Bridge. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for this special hour-long show, Navigating the Great Lakes, Life on the Lee A. Tregurtha. After spending over 37 hours on board the Lee A. Tregurtha, I didn't want to leave. Of our time on the ship, my videographer and I slept very little, a few 2-hour naps here and there. One night, closing our eyes for maybe 5 hours. There was so much to see, I did not want to miss a moment. We'll be talking with my videographer, Stephen DeLatorante, later in the program to get his perspective of the ship, documenting the crew and all we saw along our leg. I spent a lot of time just watching, often from a distance, the crew interacting, working, laughing, reminiscing of home, or detailing what their first stop off the boat would be. Steak and shake, cookie crumble, hanging with their families, taking a trip, completing house projects. They talked about any and everything. But when there was work to be done, they dove in. They pushed hard, focused on the task at hand. They cackled, as one would yell, "Let's go, every day's a Monday," because time really is irrelevant. Remember the first lesson, Lee A. Tregurtha moves at her own pace. I'm not sure what I expected, but what I was a part of was so much more than I could have ever anticipated. And so it's time for our final leg, waking up to a beautiful sunrise in the St. Mary's River as we move along Drummond Island and make the turn into Lake Huron, heading for the Mackinac Bridge. I wouldn't say it was a particularly extraordinary sunrise, and yet it was, for the simple fact that it was morning aboard the Lee A. Tregurtha. Navigating the St. Mary's River mostly happened overnight in the dark, so taking in the last stretch, well, I didn't want to miss it. A crew member navigated the Lee A at all times while on the river. There's no autopilot being used here to move through the narrow openings and around islands. This island is a familiar one, Drummond Island, and it marks a turning point for the freighter as it shifts out of the river and into Lake Huron. An easy, beautiful morning with much to look forward to.
We're looking forward to more great weather while it lasts. Typically, once we get into the fall time of the season, we all know the winds are going to pick up, and so we're really enjoying the easy wind right now and the easy sailing, I guess you could call it. And just looking forward to getting to Burns Harbor without scratching the paint.
And that's exactly what the day brought, a peaceful cruise. But it wasn't without a bit of excitement and awe. One of the highlights of taking this route from Marquette to Burns Harbor was the chance to go under the Mackinac Bridge. I was grateful the sun was up, the weather was perfect, and the opportunity didn't miss us. We passed Mackinac Island, taking in the landmarks, the Grand Hotel easily visible, and we patiently waited for that moment as remarkable as I'd hoped.
There are some days out here you'll see things that I've told my wife many a times, I'm like, I wish you could see what I'm seeing right now. There's some completely amazing things that nobody will ever see, and you can't even explain it to them.
It was a perfect start to a long final stretch. We had 15 hours left to Burns Harbor. Lake Michigan was calm, quiet. In the distance, I noted the Sleeping Bear Dunes, a faint Chicago skyline. On board, the crew used this time to catch up on maintenance around the boat, from painting to cleaning. It seemed upkeep on the Tregurtha never stopped. From the time we boarded to the time we left, there was always something to do. As the hours went on, the projects were cleaned up and preparations began to be made for our arrival to Burns Harbor.
We'll get in there. The facility will have like a hopper, and we'll swing the boom over the hopper and unload iron ore. And then after that, what they do with it is actually somewhat of a mystery to me. They put it in a big furnace and they make a big slab out of it.
The Lee A. Tregurtha is 826 feet long. It is one of 10 commercial vessels within the Interlake Steamship Company. Now picture this. Over the course of the season, these ships cross the Great Lakes more than 500 times, stop at 50 different ports, and transport over 20 million tons of raw material. It's nearly effortless, the giant freighter docking in the harbor. The landscape here, very different from the Marquette shore we left. It's industrial, it's dirty, and today, the conveyor belt at the harbor needed to unload was being repaired, and so the crew of the Tregurtha would have to wait. Regardless, there's a sense of accomplishment. Over 37 hours navigating the Great Lakes. The cargo and crew has arrived safely. They'll spend the next 10 to 12 hours here and then turn the Lee A around and head back to Marquette for another shipment. They'll face a new set of circumstances, changing winds and weather conditions. But at the end of the day, they'll have each other and they'll have the Lee A. Tregurtha.
I love that everyone comes together in the easy situations and then in the bad situations. And I don't mean dangerous situations, I mean long hours, dirty. They come together to accomplish the common goal. And that goal is to provide cargo to our customers throughout the Great Lakes.
Burns Harbor was where I got off the boat, and I'm not going to lie, I was a bit disappointed the unloading wasn't going to happen. Before we arrived, I was able to go down to the very bottom of the ship and take a look at what that process would look like, one that requires the deckhands to sit for hours down below, ensuring every pellet of iron ore makes it back to land. All right, we are about as far below deck as you can go on this ship. Don't even know how many feet. We're not even going to think about that right now, but we're in a really cool spot of the ship, and I want to have our chief engineer explain what's going to be happening down here when we get to Burns Harbor and start to unload the iron ore pellets, because this is kind of where all the action happens. While obviously it's going to be going into the hopper on the surface, it all depends on everything below here. So explain what all this is. We can't get down in there too far because there's some water down there right now, but explain it for us.
All right, so We're in the unloading system right now, or the tunnel. We've got a conveyor belt that runs the entire length of this unloading tunnel, which is almost the whole length of the ship. There is about 70 or 80 gates, which we open up hydraulically, just a few inches at a time, up to a foot maybe, and that'll dump the ore onto the belt as it's moving, and then the belt is running in a clockwise motion from our perspective here. So the cargo is gonna head back here. It's a pinch belt system, so as it gets back towards the end right here, that other belt is gonna be encapsulating that ore as it goes all the way up, because there's a pretty good length of just like straight vertical. So that whole way up, the ore is just stuck between the two belts, where then it kind of curves back over and it'll dump into the boom hopper, which is what you see outside, which then goes into the hopper on the dock.
And so this was the end of my time with the Lee A. As I looked back at the crew, it was all a bit surreal. All that I witnessed, the dedication, the hard work, the physical and mental strength, the beauty of the Great Lakes.
I will never forget this journey or this crew.
Up next, I sit down with my videographer, his perspective, and his work behind the camera. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've been enjoying this special on my trip aboard the Lee A. Tregurtha. But you know, I wasn't alone. I was fortunate enough to be able to take videographer Steven DeLatorante with me, and I want to get a little bit of your perspective of our trip. Steven, when you found out that this was going to be your assignment and you'd be spending a few days aboard the Tregurtha, what were your thoughts and how did you prepare?
Yeah, my first thought was that I was really lucky to be picked for it. It's such a big part of the UP's history. Getting to actually like go on it and see it firsthand, I mean, you know, it's fantastic.
And once we were on board and you realized the scope of what we were going to be covering, how did you move forward in that and decide to tackle it and be able to cover all the different facets of the ship?
It really didn't sink in, I think, until like that first night after we had spent the whole entire day just filming, and we really tried to see as much of it as we could the entire time. So, you know, there were these 2 or 3 hour periods where we could have breaks to sleep, but other than that, it was really just learning the entire time and meeting people.
Had you, before we went on the boats, taken moments to watch them kind of move along the water and, you know, envisioning what was happening? Was it anything of what you had expected?
It was not at all what I expected. I mean, I knew that, you know, there were crews of people constantly working on there, but I mean, when you see it out on the lake, it's so calm and peaceful, and just this boat floating by. It's really cool, but then you get on and you see all the hustle and the bustle and all the people actually moving around and making it work. It's really cool to see it firsthand.
All right, and I have to ask, did you have any favorite moments, any favorite video that you were able to capture?
The first thing that comes to mind is going under the Mackinac Bridge. That was amazing. I've driven over it so many times, but I think that was my first time actually getting to go underneath it. Also, I really loved filming the interviews, listening to those guys talk about their lives and their times on the ship, and listening to, you know, stories about the times. It was fantastic.
And now that we're back and we've had some time to reflect on the trip, what are your thoughts? Do you have any big takeaways that came to you after?
Well, I've always had an appreciation for these boats, but I think that, you know, it's gone up exponentially since then. You know, I've been kind of tracking the Tregurtha a little bit on her journey as she keeps going, and yeah, I'd say that my appreciation for what they do is much higher than it was before.
Well, it was great working with you, and super glad that we got to take this trip together, and I just appreciate all the hard work that you put into it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking me on there, and it was really enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Who knows? Maybe we'll get to go next year.
Fingers crossed, right?
Fingers crossed. All right, stick around. We have much more for you after a quick break. Welcome back. As we wrap up our hour-long special, Navigating the Great Lakes, Life on the Lee A. Tregurtha, I reflect back on all it was, an opportunity to showcase an American treasure. I have never seen a story here at TV6 have such a reach across such a massive and diverse demographic. I've received Facebook messages, emails, letters from across the country, Canada, and the UK. A Facebook Live video I posted when we traveled under the Mackinac Bridge reached 100,000 people, and that's just one of many posts from this story. Early on in my journey, it became clear we may be a world in conflict, a world struggling to find commonality, but not all is lost. That common link can be found in the simplest of facets, the ones untouched by time, the ones with stories and histories we relish. Feeling that, sharing that, watching it unfold, it's been a highlight of my career. And I thank you all for following along, sharing these stories, and for seeing the beauty and the magnitude of what it takes to keep the Great Lakes shipping industry in motion. I will continue to marvel from the shore at these boats, as I did before this assignment. But as I marvel, I'll do so with a fresh, new appreciation and respect for the men and women that maintain, navigate, and work these vessels.